if I fit neatly into a box, I wouldn't have the kind of community that I do have of people who also feel like they've never fit in a box. And I think that's probably what I'm most proud of with my art, is that I was able to create a sort of imagined community online and then at shows and performances of people who have come to me and said, I thought I was alone, but it turns out that I'm not.
My blood's from the desert, underground, 2000 BC. Oh, I come from the streets where Flushing Avenue meets 2nd Street.
Have you ever felt caught between worlds, like you don't quite fit in here, but you don't quite fit in there either? In this episode, we explore how that sense of displacement can become your greatest creative gift. Hi everyone, I'm Giovanna, and if you're new here, welcome to the Well Woman Show. This is where we hold the mic for women who are reimagining how we lead, create, and connect without sacrificing our well-being in the process. I'm your host, Giovanna Rossi. Today, we're talking with Amanda Pascali, a singer-songwriter and researcher who went viral sharing traditional Sicilian folk songs with hundreds of thousands of followers.
Cleopatra, they call me, roots that go walking, sand and stone. Oh, Cleopatra, valigia in mano e sto fabbricando questo cammino.
But her journey isn't just about preserving the past. It's about using ancient wisdom to speak to our most modern struggles. Through her translations of Rosa Balistreri's songs, she is reclaiming women's stories that have been silenced and showing us how tradition can be a tool for transformation. We talk about belonging, identity, and how owning your differences creates the very community you've been searching for.
The pen in my hand, I was left with the pen in my hand.
Before we dive into the interview, I want to tell you about the Power Up Workshop. Whether you're at year end, quarter end, or just in the middle of a big transition, this 90-minute process helps you reflect on where you've been, release what's holding you back, and ground yourself in what's next. If you're ready to shift from hustle to ease, from external wants to deep desires, the Power Up Workshop is available anytime at wellwomanlife.com/powerupworkshop. All right, let's jump into today's episode. I'm speaking with Amanda Pascali. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Giovanna.
Oh, it's so good to have you. Amanda, I'd love to start with just having you share with listeners, who are you in the world today?
I am Amanda Pascali, so I'm a singer-songwriter. I also translate songs. I do a lot of archival work, and I'm a Harrington Fellow doing research on Italian studies and ethnomusicology at the University of Texas at Austin.
Okay. And Amanda, I want to ask you, I'm so intrigued and I was so wonderful to come across your music and you on social media. And when I heard a little bit about your story, I thought, oh my gosh, I just have to reach out to her and have her on the show because I think some of what you deal with your music and in your profession is really aligned with what we talk about on the Well Woman Show. And in terms of like just taking belonging and identity for one example, um, I think that, you've described the experience of being kind of caught between worlds as something really central to your music. And I certainly really identified with that when I heard that and then heard your music. But I'm curious how that feeling of being caught between worlds has shaped your identity, not just as an artist, but as a person.
Yeah, I was always the weird kid in school, and I guess it pertains to this show, but I was, the weird girl as well. I had a mustache and a unibrow, and I was like I felt so different from everybody around me. I was like the kid that brought, quote unquote, weird food to lunch. And so when I was 12, I picked up a guitar and I decided that music would be the space where I could be, who I truly was without apologies. Because where I didn't find a space for myself already, I figured I'll just create that sonically. I'll create that with music. And I started, playing guitar. I started learning songs, and then I started writing songs to tell the story of my family, of, me being the oldest of three girls, in a family that was, so multicultural in the American South. I was born in New York City, but then I grew up in Texas. And so there were so many things around me growing up that I didn't really know how to make sense of. And I really believe that a huge part of my identity was created through music, and I was able to express that in the music that I was writing, which was essentially the stories of myself and my family.
Mm. How did you choose to do that through music? Were you already playing music and then you were like, "Oh, I feel like myself when I'm playing music, so therefore I'm gonna do this," or did it sort of happen the other way around where you were like, "I need an outlet and what can I do?" and then found music?
First of all, I grew up middle class because of the sacrifices that my parents made for me as immigrants in the United States. So I think that that's the first thing, is being aware of that allowed me the opportunity to think about arts as something that I could pursue. I like to think that, maybe in another lifetime, my parents would also have been artists and would have had the opportunities to pursue music in the way that I'm pursuing it now. But I think in addition to that, my parents and my family in general, w- we always had music playing in the house. And so music was around me all the time, and all kinds of music. Everything from, rock and roll to hip hop to opera music and classical. I mean, there was so much there, and I was surrounded by it. And in addition to that, I grew up in the early 2000s. I'm 27. And I grew up, with a lot of girl bands, and this idea of like the rocker girl kind of figure really attracted me, I think, from a young age. And so when I picked up the guitar, that was the first musical foray for me. Was I was playing rock music, and then, going into my teenage years, that was also like my form of rebellion. And then it became my first job. I was like performing in these rowdy Texas motorcycle bars and playing music in these places that I definitely should not have been, as a young girl. But that's kind of where my musical beginning all kind of started.
Yeah. Okay, and, I feel like your music is quite rebellious, and certainly and I'd love to hear the story of taking, like, a really kind of old song or folk song and how you reinterpret and translate that and make it, something that a modern audience can really connect with, and if you could give an example of something like that, I think that will help us understand kinda your process.
Yeah, so a couple years ago, I won a Fulbright Fellowship to translate and revitalize Sicilian folk music, specifically the songs of Rosa Balistreri, one of the first Italian women to publicly denounce social inequality through music. So think of her like the Italian version of like Bob Dylan or Joan Baez or Odetta, or, one of those American singers, but infinitely more rebellious, just taking into context the circumstances under which she grew up, in poverty, with hunger and this immense weight of sexism that she was living under. So I embarked on a trip to Sicily to do this, the first comprehensive project to translate and revitalize folk songs written in Sicilian, a UNESCO endangered language, and sung and made popular by Rosa Balistreri. And that was my first experience taking really old songs and kind of making them new again. I mean, I don't know if I can really take credit for making those songs new again, but I think it is notable the fact that when I started performing those songs and performing them also in English, the most widely spoken language in the world, people started to connect with that, especially on social media. And I think that in a way, maybe it doesn't make them make those songs new, but it shows how relevant those songs still are in the current day. And an example for you, you asked for an example, is I just released a new record called Roses and Basil. Roses and Basil is the title track of the album, but it comes from a song that I translated. The original song is called La Simincina, or The Seeds, in Sicilian, and my kind of reworking of that is this song called Roses and Basil. And of course, when you translate a song, it's different from translating, like a document or something written, because you're essentially translating poetry. And in poetry, you have rhythm and rhyme and metric and all of these things that need to be preserved in order to convey the original feeling of the song or poem, or get a little bit closer to it, because of course a translation can never be an accurate depiction of what the original work was. But this song, Roses and Basil, is my reinterpretation of something very ancient. It's an old lullaby that traditionally a mother would sing to a child, saying, don't worry, your father will come home soon and he'll bring you the seeds. And, the seeds are the seeds of crops. So essentially, don't worry, we will have food to eat. We will keep going. And just close your eyes and go to sleep. It'll all be okay.
My angel, sweet dreams, soon your papa will come, it seems, and he'll bring you the roses and basil, the roots and the hazel, saffron and thyme, and he'll bring you red roses and basil, the roots and the hazel, saffron and thyme. Vo, 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 dormi figlia e fai lavoro. Vo, 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 dormi figlia e fai lavoro. Vo, e all'arrivo ora vieni l'upacito e ti porta la Simincina, la rosa marina e lo basilico.
I think that's something that, will always resonate with anyone around the world in any time period. So my modern version, Roses and Basil, is essentially the bilingual reinterpretation of that very old song.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting the way you pull out these themes from these really ancient, you know, songs that are poetic, and you pull out these themes that are really universal feelings that everybody can relate to, and I think that happened with most of the songs on that album, I would think. Can you talk about that with the song with a couple of other songs? I'm thinking of like Amori.
Amori, amori, amori,
Or there's another one about Wake Up Baby.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I can talk about that. Wake Up Baby is my bilingual interpretation of a very old song called E voi dormite ancora. which means "and you're still sleeping." It's part of a very old tradition of the serenata, the serenade, in which usually a man would go to the window or the balcony of a woman that he wants to marry and he would serenade her in hopes that she would come out and say that she would marry him. But in E voi dormite ancora, obviously, she's still sleeping, so she doesn't actually come out on her balcony. And I think there are a lot of ways to read that or to interpret that. My interpretation is that whoever this person is, she's probably ignoring you. I think it's not necessarily that she's still sleeping, but perhaps leaving this guy on red, as my generation would say.
So wake up, baby. No time for sleeping. It's time you wake up and you say you love me. Till then I'll wait for you until you want me.
But I think that that's a really relatable feeling for anyone in any time period. I mean, nowadays it would be, yeah, someone left your DM on red, but in the 50s and 60s, it might be that they don't pick up the phone. And before that, it might be that they don't, meet you where you agreed to meet or come out on their balcony or even acknowledge the fact that you exist. And that's something that's relatable, I think, for any gender, for any time period, and for any place. So Wake Up Baby takes this "E voi dormite ancora" and turns it into wake up, not necessarily in the sense of wake up from your sleep, but wake up in the sense of why can't you see that we were meant to be together? It's a timeless feeling of longing and also of rejection.
I need you, darling, if you only knew. Feels like years have passed and still you're sleeping. Well, I'll wait for you until you want to see me.
Yeah, it's just beautiful and just so well done. I wonder if you have a sense of like why were you drawn to do this, and it seems like you must be a really old soul, like to be able to connect to that ancient sort of um folklore and music. How do you how do you see that, like connecting with the modern world and your generation, and then the deep kind of ancestry that you're sort of revitalizing or uncovering or somehow making live again?
I think I always have been an old soul. And I think there are multiple reasons for that. Maybe it's because I'm the oldest daughter. And so I was always, instead of sitting at the kids' table or, however you would think about it, I was always kind of around the adults. And I was also raised in large part by my grandma, who loved to watch these like old spaghetti western movies. And so I grew up with a lot of like old movies, old music, and even still today, most of my friends are older than me. I spend a lot of time in the university around colleagues who are older than me. I don't know. I've always been someone who has wanted to absorb a lot of knowledge and history from what's around me. But at the same time, I do feel like I'm very much a product of this generation. I wouldn't have the audience that I do if I hadn't have gone viral on social media and been, very um, chronically online, as they would say. Uh, and so yeah, it's a strange way of being, but I think it's not so strange when you consider the fact that there are so many people in my age group that also connect with that. And so perhaps being an old soul isn't quite as strange as we make it out to be.
Yeah, I think it's that the fact of being an old soul is not strange. I think what's unusual is to have somebody who can bridge that and bring it forward into the now, um, of people's lives, and I think that's what's unusual about what you've done. Um, and, congratulations on all of your work and your success with the Fulbright and then with your music and then, of course, going viral. And I wonder, Amanda, if you can speak to the challenge that you have as a person with a personality online and then your actual, in real life, sort of behind the scenes life and how you sort of balance the two.
Giovanna, I that's something that I struggle with, I feel like. I think there's this like intimacy, and I don't know if I want to call it a false intimacy, but I think there's a certain intimacy that I have with people who follow me online where uh at times it can, it can feel like they have a window into my life, into my home. I mean, the videos that I film are in my home, but at the same time, it's all through a screen. And so I have to mediate what I tell people and what I show people, and I struggle with that because I think with short form content, as I was mentioning before, if something doesn't fit into a 30-second sound bite or doesn't look Instagrammable, I think we're all hesitant to show that to the world, even though that's still part of our everyday lives. I think a lot of people don't know things about my everyday life just simply because I struggle with that transparency online. You might notice that in most of my videos, I never speak. And so a lot of people who follow me don't even know what my voice sounds like unless they dig deeper and they look for podcasts like this or other interviews. A lot of people think that I was born and raised in Italy and English is my second language, which is not true at all. Italian is my second language and I struggle with it very much when I speak sometimes. So yeah, yeah, I still don't feel like I have a good way of navigating the real life social media balance. And I find myself kind of fed up with a lot of things that I see online that are clearly pretending to be real when in reality they're obviously not.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, and, that's so fascinating that Italian is your second language. I think you're right. I think probably people wouldn't guess that, based on your singing voice and the language. Um, was it your grandmother that spoke Italian to you? That the grandmother that
Actually,
raised you?
Actually, no one spoke any language to me other than English because I grew up in an English-only house. My dad wanted to enforce the English-only rule, and, I think, growing up, I really resented that, and I think it wasn't until I was an adult that I could try to, understand maybe why he wanted that as someone who really, sacrificed a lot to come to the United States and build, the life that he did and build the family that he did, saying, "We are going to be an all-American family, we're going to speak only English." It wasn't until middle school that I was able to have a choice to study Italian, because the choices that were offered to me were, French, Spanish, and Italian.
Mm.
And so, of course, I chose Italian and really kind of excelled at it because I always grew up with the sounds. And so then it was just the Latin sounds. And so then it was just a matter of learning how to form sentences and that kind of thing, but all of my practice has essentially been listening to music, speaking with my friends, and then, of course, when I lived, in Italy, obviously speaking to everyone around me, and then having the immense responsibility of translating that into English, which is, a form of power, I
Mm.
think, that I'm aware that I have as an American, and it's something that I think about a lot and I try to be sensitive towards.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, that's so fascinating, and I just wanna say, that I also, spoke French and Spanish in school and was given the opportunity to learn Italian when I lived in Spain, which was really kind of confusing and weird in college. Um, so Italian never really stuck. But as I said to you before we started recording, I have been learning Italian, and my daughter is learning, um, and it's part of this sort of reconnection to my ancestry. And I'm third generation Italian, and I think that a lot of women are, at different points in their lives, are connecting back to where they came from and making those connections. And particularly, you know, going back to what you started out with, which was sort of how you felt really like the odd one out as you were growing up. I think for people who feel like they're between cultures, they don't, fit here, but they don't really fit there, and they're not really. I mean, I grew up actually in 2 different countries, and so, I was always kind of the other in whatever country I was in, and, you get used to it because that's just your experience. But I think, researching your ancestry is so important, and I love something that I heard you say, or I think I saw it in an interview or something. I'd love you to speak to it, which is that when you do feel that in between and that pull and not feeling fully that you belong in either space, um, there's a sort of a positive outcome that you've created, which is to lean into all of the diversity of who you are and all of the differences and make that who you are rather than always trying to fit into one or the other. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I think that, that's that's still something that I have to remind myself, because if I fit neatly into a box, I I wouldn't have the kind of community that I do have of people who also feel like they've never fit in a box, and I think that's probably what I'm most proud of with my art is that I Giovanna, I don't really think that I've done much, but I think I've just shared my story. I think I've just simply talked about it, and by doing that, I was able to create a sort of imagined community online and then at shows and performances of people who have come to me and said, "I thought I was alone, but it turns out that I'm not." And I think it's tough being in the US, and it's tough being in Italy, being around people who can trace their family back generations and generations and generations to be local to whatever that area is. I think it's really tough for me to be in those situations because I do find myself wishing that I fit into some box.
Mm.
Um, and I don't know if that's necessarily a better life or if what I have is a better life, but I know that the feeling of being able to make people feel less alone is an immense gift for me. And so, if nothing else, I feel very fortunate that I'm able to provide that for people.
Yeah. I'm speaking with Amanda Pascali on the Well Woman Show, and we'll be right back. If you've ever found yourself worrying if you'll ever really make it in the thing you're pursuing, waking up at 3 a.m. with that familiar wave of anxiety, feeling drained, like no matter how much you do, it's never enough, stuck leading in your team, second guessing every move, or procrastinating because moving forward just feels too heavy, then I want to personally invite you into something different. This isn't another do more, hustle harder program. The Well Woman Academy is where you'll be deeply heard, truly seen, and fully supported. It's where high-achieving women like you, who are out there changing the world, come to release the anxiety, burnout, perfectionism, and self-doubt that hold them back. The result? You don't just survive. You get to live your well woman life, a life of joy, ease, and abundance, even when the world around you feels chaotic. This is about rewriting the rules for how we love, lead, and succeed. because it's your time. The Well Woman Academy coaching program opens in 2026. If you want to be the first to know when the doors open and get early access, join the waitlist at wellwomanlife.com/academy waitlist. We're back on the show with Amanda Pascali going into the segment called Superpowers for Success, which is a quick round of questions, Amanda, so that listeners can get to know you a little better. And the first question I have for you is, what does success in life mean for you?
I feel like the easy answer to that is happiness. How to get there? I'm not I'm not entirely sure. I think maybe the harder answer and the more personal answer for me is success in life is probably making my family proud, making my ancestors proud, thinking about the women in my family, the women in my family past, what they were able to do, what their dreams were, and thinking me now in 2025, I'm able to do those crazy dreams. And I'm able to do that because of the sacrifices that others made for me. And, whenever I'm doing something and I ask myself, am I achieving success? Am I being successful? I think about those women past and I think about what they would say about that and how they would feel about what I'm doing. And I think that makes me feel successful.
Mm, beautiful. And when did you know you were really good at what you do? And I'm going to give you a little bit of a caveat there. Um, t- if you can think of a time when you knew you were really good at something, not just the external validation of like going viral on socials and all of that, but was there a time where you just really knew like this is my thing?
I don't think there was a specific time when I knew that I was good at what I do. I think to answer your question with the caveat, to answer the caveat aspect of your question, I think there are moments where I hear my music in an instant and it's so quickly that I don't realize that it's me. I just kind of hear it. Maybe it's in the background or maybe it's like, on speakers that aren't very good quality. And so I kind of only hear an angle of it that I'm not used to hearing. And when I hear that, I think, wow, that's really cool. What is that? Oh, it's me. um, but I think to answer the question without the caveat, when I was a preteen and I first started playing music, I thought that I was just having fun. I would take the guitar into my bedroom and look up, and this is what was great about growing up in the age of the internet. This is what was great about it. I would just go to my room and I would look up chords and lyrics, and I would learn song after song after song on the guitar and play it for myself. And then I started to play for adults. Just not even as a real performance, but I would be in someone's home or something and I would pick up the guitar and I would play and I would sing. And there was a moment when I was very young that I would see adults' reactions to what I was doing. And at that moment, it was less that I realized I was good at something and more that I realized that I had a certain power over adults. And to realize that as a kid was uh, really impressionante. It was like something that left a big impression on me to think to myself, I can use this for other purposes. I can use this as a medium to talk about things that I wouldn't normally be able to talk about. I can use this as something to make people take me seriously. Because as a kid, adults usually don't listen to what you have to say, what you think, what you believe, except for those like cool, eclectic teachers in school that will actually listen to you, give you attention. I saw that as an opportunity to kind of manipulate the people around me in a way, and maybe also for a good purpose, manipulate them into listening to my story and listening to what I had to say. And now, over a decade later that I've been playing music, I can confirm that to be true. I think music is the way that we say things that we can't say speaking.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's what art, is, right? Amanda, can you describe a personal habit that contributes to your well-being so you can do everything that you do in the world?
I think one thing I I do, that I've done for my whole life, and that I actively, try to do now, that I believe is really important, is, actively listening to music without, looking at something or paying attention to something else. I love vinyl records, and I love, the ritual of listening to music and doing nothing else while listening. I think in this day and age, uh, we are so hungry for distractions and for quick things to constantly be occupying our brain, that we have a tendency to always, you know, want more, when in reality, the more that we're looking for, I think, is authenticity. And that's what I always find. And I find satisfies that hunger when I do nothing else but just to listen to music, put on a record and do absolutely nothing else. Or close my eyes, or, you know, try to think about the lyrics, think about the arrangements. That might not be a super exciting answer, but yeah, I think listening to music without doing anything else at the same time, it helps me put into perspective why I do what I do.
Yeah, absolutely, and that is a very interesting answer, Amanda, because, it's very aligned with and I've spoken with hundreds of women leaders on this show, and something that always comes up in that answer is a sort of a meditative, state where you're engaged in something, but without a lot of distraction, and that's what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah.
Um And so, a couple last questions before we wrap up. What advice would you give your younger self, say 10 years ago when you were starting out?
Hmm. I think I would tell her that it gets exhausting to pretend, and you can't pretend forever. So the sooner you realize that who you are is a beautiful person, then the better your life will be, the better the art you make will be, the better everything will be, and also the better you will be able to connect with others, and form genuine friendships and relationships. I think, going back to what we were saying, I spent a long time trying to fit into a box, and I think I would probably save my younger self a lot of time and agony, if I could just tell her, "There is no box for you. So you should probably stop looking for that box as soon as possible." And then, just start saying, as they say in Sicilian, "Fottitini." Just, you know, go your own way, and, realize that you will never fit in, no
Mhm.
matter where you go, and be okay with that, because that's not being alone. In fact, there are so many people around the world who can, say the same thing, that they never felt like they fit in, and that's not bad.
Right, right, and that's how you connected with so many people was by doing that. I love that. Last couple questions. Do you identify as a feminist?
Of course.
What does that mean for you?
Um, well, this is a fun story, but I actually me and a few friends in high school, we formed a feminist club. It was the first, like, feminist club at the high school, and, I don't know, I just, I grew up mostly surrounded by women, so I'm the oldest of 3 girls. Of course, there was my mom, who was, always, I think, breaking down barriers as an immigrant woman in a male-dominated world, and then there was my grandma as well, and then my dad, and he was the only man kind of in that space that I was growing up in, and so women have always been the center of my world. So what I would what I would say feminism means to me is obviously the belief that women should be considered equal to men, but in a deeper sense, in an artistic sense, for me, what it means is that women are the main characters. A woman is the main character of the story and is the main character of my story. So, although I grew up with a lot of media that portrayed men as being the main characters, being the one that goes out and, does field work and embarks on these exciting adventures and projects and creates these masterpieces, what we call masterpieces of art and literature and all these things. For me in my life, that never really jived with the people that I actually met and interacted with, because in my life those main characters were women. And so I think in my art, what it means to be a feminist is to always center women in a story that has always been a feminine story, but that hasn't necessarily been acknowledged by other people.
Yeah, or even bringing out the woman-centered perspective of the story that has traditionally been a male-interpreted story.
Mhm.
Would that fit? I mean, would that be something I'm sure that you've worked on, where you've seen old ancient ballads or songs, and they're very heavily male focused, and but you find the female perspective?
I hope to say that. I wanna say that, but at the same time, I don't wanna speak for all women. So I would say that I seek to find the perspective that reflects me and who I am, and I am also a woman. So, I hope that women will listen to my work or hear my work and feel that they can connect to it and that I'm delivering on the woman's perspective. But
Yeah.
at the same time, I don't want to say that I would have the same perspective as another woman, because that's also reflects the complexity of the different perspectives that we can have. But definitely, you're right. In a lot of these old songs, they're told from the male perspective, and so I think it's delusional to think that that's the only perspective that exists. And growing up with the male gaze, you would believe that that is the only perspective that exists, but in fact, it's not.
Yeah, I mean, just in Wake Up Baby, it's like, I love how you flip that and say, like, well, actually, maybe it's not just that she's sleeping. Maybe she just doesn't want to see you.
Right, and
It's
yeah,
the
I
female.
I guess now that you're mentioning it, I don't know if anybody has ever said that or written that or published that anywhere, that uh, the argument that maybe it's not what it seems. I spent a lot of time wrestling with Wake Up Baby, because initially I thought that the person that was the subject of that song, I thought that maybe they had died or something. Like, why is this person not answering? Or are they asleep in the sense of like eternal sleep?
Mm.
No, they're just not answering. And could it be that it's because she's not asleep? Um, I like to consider those questions and to think, that other people would come to that conclusion as well. I don't think there's anything particularly novel in me doing that. I'm just a woman in the 21st century looking at things that have not really been questioned in the public sphere before.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you're doing that. And I definitely resonated with that immediately because historically, women have been required in order to fit in and be what everyone expects them to be. They're required to respond to men's desires and men's, requests. And I think flipping that and saying, well, yeah, maybe she didn't really want to see you anyway. Um, all right. Well, last question, Amanda. What are you reading right now? What's on your nightstand?
What's on my nightstand? Um, Honestly, what's on my nightstand is Il Gattopardo, the leopard, the famous book about Sicily during the unification.
Mm.
They made it into a Netflix show now, and I am long overdue, but I saw the movie from the 1960s directed by Visconti with Claudia Cardinale in it, and I was like, I think it's time for me to read the book, so now I'm reading.
Awesome. Okay. Well, we love to put what our guests are reading in the show notes for other people to read. So I don't know if folks will be able to read that if they don't speak Italian, but we will include it. And Amanda Pascali, it's been such a pleasure speaking with you today.
Thank you so much, Giovanna.
That's it for our show today. Remember, if you need support to live your Well Woman life, follow us on Instagram at Well Woman Life. And don't forget, you can catch the show on NPR anytime. Just head to npr.org/podcasts and search for The Well Woman Show. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts and leave us a quick review. It really helps others find the show. I always love hearing from you, so drop a comment or message me on socials at Well Woman Life. I'm Giovanna Rossi for The Well Woman Show. Until next time, have a super powerful week.